Good afternoon. We're here to share with you the pyramid model for promoting social emotional competence for preschoolers. This is one of our sessions from the Directors of Special Education Institute, brought to you by the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. We presented this information at the DOSE Institute September 7th through the 9th, 2022. Today, on the call with us doing this information, we have myself, Stephanie Ernst, Kathy Meredith, and Alicia Reeves. I'll briefly do some introductions. I've been at KDE for a little over 4 years, and prior to coming to KDE, I was a preschool teacher for 14 years and really specialized in supporting students with behavior needs or disabilities that required a little bit of extra support. And I came to KDE just to look to be able to support teachers and districts with those students as well. Next, we have Kathy Meredith.
Hey everyone, I'm Kathy Meredith. I come from West Virginia, actually. That's where I live. So most of my teaching experience was with kids with autism. And then I went to Marshall University to work at a state level with kids with autism. At which point I crossed the bridge and worked for KEDC, the co-op, as the autism consultant for that region. I come to you today because we have an American Resource Plan grant that I work with, and for early learning, we are focusing in on the pyramid models. So that is my role with KDE at this point.
Thanks, Kathy. And we have Alicia Reeves.
Hi, I'm Alicia Reeves. I started with KDE in January of 2022, working with the American Rescue Plan project work as an early learning specialist. And I'm now serving as the Assistant Early Learning Administrator for the Office of Special Education and Early Learning. Prior to coming to KDE, I worked in a small district in South Central Kentucky as the preschool coordinator and special education director. And then prior to that, I had the honor to serve as a special education teacher in an elementary school, working with students with a variety of needs and just supporting them and supporting their families.
Thanks, Alicia. Thank you, Kathy. So we're going to move on. And just for a moment, I realize that you guys are watching this virtually, but we still want to do just a brief check-in as part of our introduction to the pyramid model. So on the screen, you're going to see some faces, and it says, "This is how I feel today." So just take a deep breath, take a moment, and think about how you're feeling. And we'll go through that with you here on this webcast. Today, I am feeling happy. I found out just a little while ago that it's National Chocolates Day and National Throw Out Your Leftovers Day. So I'm really happy to go home this afternoon and I'm tossing all the turkey in the trash. I'm excited to throw out those leftovers, and I'm excited to be here today presenting to you guys some information about the pyramid model. Kathy or Alicia, would you like to share how you're feeling today?
Sure. This is Kathy. I'm a little nervous, just like that little girl chewing her fingernails on the right-hand side. I get really nervous about recording and hearing my voice, so it kind of like takes me back. But in addition, I'm happy to do it because pyramid is one of my very favorite things to talk about.
And this is Alicia, and I'm feeling happy today. I'm happy that my family and I made it through a wonderful holiday season and for Thanksgiving. And then we are also traveling to get to see my niece play basketball. She plays for South Carolina Upstate, and they play Vanderbilt tonight. So I'm happy to get to be able to do that.
And we wish her well, Alicia. So send her some good wishes and hope you guys have a great time. This is a really nice activity to do with your kiddos in the classroom. Just a way to check in and see how they're feeling as they come off the bus or come in from the car line. You know, our kiddos need a transition, and we need to know as teachers how they're feeling so we can help support their day. So, just a nice little activity to do a little check in, maybe as they come in and put their backpack away or wash their hands and head over to that carpet. Just a really nice tool to have in your toolbox. And you'll see here that this does come to you from challengingbehavior.org. So, why are we here? If a child doesn't know how to read, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to swim, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to multiply, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to drive, we teach. If a child doesn't know how to behave, do we teach? Do we punish? That last sentence is not as easily answered as the others, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And I recently attended a conference where I listened to a speaker, and one of the things that really struck me was the comment she said after this quote: "We are only in control of our own behaviors." And I think as educators, that's something we really need to think about when we look at this. When we look at, how do we teach these kids to do all these skills, but then behavior, we're in control of our own behavior, and how we react to the student's behavior is something that we can work on together. When we presented this at the Dose Institute, this was a moment when we asked folks to find a buddy next to them and talk about behaviors that the district has seen this last school year and discuss some strategies that you wanted to share. So right now, I would like you just to think as you're watching this webcast about the behaviors that you're seeing in your district and some of those strategies that maybe you or your teachers are using in their classroom. Some behaviors that you might have seen, especially in preschool, might be biting, tossing furniture, clearing shelves, harm to themselves or to others. And then just think about those strategies maybe that you're using within your classroom and district as well. And as you think about those strategies, as we continue the presentation, I want you to think about what you're already doing, how that will fit into the pyramid model framework.
People generally see what they look for and hear what they listen for. This is a quote from Harper Lee. And this quote resonated with me as an administrator with the pyramid work. When I first heard about the pyramid work in the state of Kentucky and what our regional training centers were doing with the work, I really was just excited to hear about the opportunity for support in serving children who demonstrated challenging behaviors in the classroom. At that time, and it was pre-COVID, we in our district were seeing an increase in the frequency of behaviors. It seemed that more and more children were coming with us with more needs around challenging behaviors. And so when our regional training center discussed the pyramid model and what that would look like when working in a district, I was on board 100% and ready to sign up my district. And the takeaway from that is, as an administrator, when we hear about things like you're going to hear about today, it's really important that we consider our teachers' needs, our classroom needs, our student needs, and our family needs before we sign up for everything 100%. So I encourage you that what you hear today, that you'll take it and you'll share it with your teachers. You'll share it with building level administrators, other district administrators, and really create a vision for how using something like the pyramid model in your district would work.
Thank you, Alicia. I think that's a great quote. And I think it really sets us for the stage for our partners that we have in this work and why it's so important to hear and listen and take time to reflect. Our partners for the pyramid model framework across the state, of course, are our families. First and foremost, without our families, we don't have our students. We have our teachers and staff who so diligently work hard every day to provide the care for our students. And then our regional training centers. Across the state, we have 5 regional training centers that provide direct services, technical assistance, and support to districts across the state. And those are Anderson, Ashland, Berea, Callaway, and Simpson. If you're not sure about your regional training center for your district, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information will be provided at the end of the presentation today.
So let's dig in and look at the pyramid model. You may have heard about the pyramid model before. You may be one of our districts we're working with. But let's take a look and kind of dig into the different pieces. Of course, it looks like a pyramid and it's a 3-tiered system, and we've all seen those before in MTSS and various programs. It is a very comprehensive framework. What we need to also understand that's hard for others to understand is that it is not a curriculum, it is not a product. Pyramid model is a house or a bowl. It's been referred to as that. And all the evidence-based practices for positive behavior support for preschoolers fits into this model. So there is over 40 years of research going on that has gone on that has proven that it works with preschool. So synonymously with pyramid is called preschool PBIS. There are 3 tiers, but the most important one right now is the effective workforce. To get to instruction in your classroom and setting up appropriately, we need to have an effective workforce. And that's just making sure all of our teachers are trained, making sure that we have administrative support, building support, and district support. Without that, then the rest of it just kind of falls to the wayside, kind of like a house if the foundation isn't there. So first you have the first tier, like with everything else, it's all universal, all kids, all the time. In looking at the environment and nurturing responses for relationships. The second tier is for that group of kids that just needs a little bit more training, a little bit more support in social and emotional supports. And of course, on top 3, there are those few 5% kids that still need a more of a focused look at what their instruction needs to be. It could be because of some severe behaviors, their disability. It could be any of those where the universal and then the secondary prevention just doesn't cut it for those kids. I like looking at the outcomes for teachers and staff, and that's what we want to know. What are we going to get if we are fully invested into the pyramid program? What are we going to see as an outcome? So for teachers, it gives them a shared language for communicating expectations. It gives them an improved capacity to teach social and emotional skills, improved capacity to address challenging behaviors, ability to support families to promote social and emotional skills, feeling supported by a program in efforts to address challenging behaviors, positive relationships with families around issues related to challenging behaviors, and a high fidelity program report that no children are asked to leave due to behavior. So you see with those outcomes, we get a happier teacher. We get a teacher that feels strong in what they do, that they do have the skills. And if you look at most of your teachers, they do a lot of the right things that fit into the pyramid program. And I think a big important piece of this too is the support and the relationships that we can form with our families. So the outcomes for families, we provide them a team now. If we are given the strategies through Pyramid to form those relationships, we now have a team between the family and the teachers for intervention strategies for their kiddos. Parents report feeling more supported in preventing and addressing challenging behaviors, and you're going to see a decrease in parent concerns about safety and behavior. So let's look at some of the research. What do we need to address challenging behavior? We noted before that the challenge behavior is a problem that many teachers identify, and it's probably one of the top one or two of what's frustrating when we become preschool teachers, especially after COVID. So let's look at some of the statistics. 63% of the children with high levels of externalizing behavior challenges at 2 continue at age 5. So if in early learning we see these external behaviors and challenges and they're not addressed, we're still going to see those at 5. They just kind of don't go away. And this one astounding percentage for me was adolescents identified with conduct problems as young children commit 50% of the adolescent crime and 75% of the violent crime. Children with no aggressive or oppositional behavior in early years are unlikely to have clinical concerns in adolescence. So for me, that speaks volumes of our task with our early learners. And Pyramid, in addition to our 3 to 5, they also address kids, it's 0 to 5. So we look at those, and there's a whole other program for those early learners. The purpose of this slide is to define why do we look at equity and culturally responsive practices. And digging deeper into the research, we start to notice patterns that represent disproportionalities among young children. The Office of Civil Rights Data Collection report to the 2017 and 2018 revealed patterns of racial and gender disproportionality. So if we were doing this in person, I would just pause for a minute and look at the percentages. For boys, boys are 54% of the enrollment in a preschool class, and of those 54%, 83% of them have been suspended. For girls, it's 17%, and for the Black population, they are 18%, but they are 43% suspended. And that's a big number. That's a concerning number. So if you look at that also through our little kids that are white or Hispanic, those numbers kind of speak out, especially for the boys and the Black community. Those are some astounding numbers, and they are far different. This research comes from the Civil Rights Data Collection, and that is our latest data. So I just wonder what has happened after COVID and we're back to school and what those numbers look like.
Kathy, absolutely. Thank you for sharing this data. And again, you touched on this briefly, but I would just add, when we look at this data, it's collective for all early childhood programs across the nation. So it does encompass not only state-funded preschool, but Head Start and childcare. And we had some really great conversations in person about what this looks like. And regardless of where the data comes from, even last week when we presented at another conference, we talked about those childcare students that are across between childcare, preschool, Head Start. They come to all pieces of that. So we really have some great data here to look at, and I love how you've added this slide so we can take a moment to really reflect on those numbers and what we can do, especially in Kentucky, to prevent these numbers from going up.
So the pyramid model includes supports for all children, and I think that is a misconception in some areas. that it's not just for those kids with the behavioral issues, but this addresses all children, um, how big their behaviors are or how small they are. And we also need to keep in mind that we know that most of the underlying reasons why we see behaviors in our kids is the development of social and emotional competence. So, with that in mind, we have a big task on addressing that. But disruptive behavior is one of the most important that we can pose a problem for inclusion in many programs. Teachers have identified children behavior as challenge. It's one of the problems they identify as the reason they leave the field in an early childhood education. So if we go back to the pyramid and we look at the workforce as being the foundation, it is so important to get our teachers the tools that they need to address these behaviors with kids. Removing children from a program is one way that challenging behavior is addressed, and children are removed at alarming rates based on national data. The pyramid model provides the practices that teachers need to support all children's social and emotional growth and address the challenging behaviors. And I think one thing that stands out to me, and I was so guilty of this, if it was a bad day, just call mom or dad and ask if he could go home. Or the parent would call us and say, why don't I just come and pick him up? And I'm like, okay, just come and pick him up. Well, that is suspension and expulsion, and I never had thought about that before. So I have one kid many years ago that really was aggressive, and we had to call his grandfather all the time. Well, did I think that that was wrong? No, I thought that was a good idea. So a lot of that doesn't even get put into our system. Those are things that we don't know are called suspension and expulsion, but they are. And that the goal of Pyramid is to have a program where no kids need to leave the room. And this last statistic on this slide, preschool children are 3 times more likely to be expelled than children in kindergarten through 12th grade. And this is what we want to see. These are the areas of social and emotional supports that we need to address for our kids. Number one is confidence. And I think about my own child in kindergarten. He struggled. He knew all the answers. He knew what to do, but he did not have the confidence to put those answers down. So he would look off of somebody else's paper, or he would just shut down and not do any of the work. So that was an area that comes home to me. Capacity to develop good relationships with peers and adults, very important, especially out of COVID, when many of these kids didn't see anyone else but an adult. Concentration and persistence on challenging behaviors. How many of these kids have you seen since COVID that just really do not have an attention span to stay on task and figure them out? You know, many of our kids have been on a screen, on games, on TVs, and haven't learned that task. Ability to communicate their emotions. And we know in most of our kids that they know they feel bad, they know that something's going on, and we see that in different behaviors that come out, and they can't really explain what's going on inside. The ability to listen to instructions and be attentive, ability to solve social problems, and ability to calm down when feeling strong emotions. These are the areas that we address through the pyramid model and provide instruction to. So what do just sit and think for just a minute, what do children do when they don't have each of these skills? What behaviors are you seeing?
Kathy, well, I know even as an adult, when I can't focus on these skills, I don't act out, but maybe I have a bad day. So I think this
Right.
is great. I mean, even for us as adults, those are all key social emotional skills that are needed, and for us too as adults to function in society today. But man, I think I appreciate all the sharing that you're doing today, and I think back to some of the kids, and I'm like, okay, so they didn't have the social emotional skills that they really needed. And that's what triggered some of those really sometimes scary behaviors in the classroom. I think I've shared with you, Kathy, I had a child that, was able to push me over the bookshelf or another shelving unit in the classroom. And, we had students that were able or not able to communicate their needs during mealtime. And as you have shared, it reminds me these are all social emotional skills. Maybe they didn't have that ability to effectively communicate how they were feeling that day or to solve their own problem, right?
Right. Okay, I'm missing a slide. Okay, so the outcome for children, now that we know the skills that we're looking for, in working with the pyramid model, diving into the social and emotional trainings that we have, you're going to see a growth in their social and emotional skills. You're going to see them taking turns and sharing and working out conflict issues with the other child. You're going to see a growth in that. And those are so important when we think about moving on to kindergarten, that they need those skills to move on. You're going to see a decrease in overall disruptive behavior in the classroom. And that happens very strongly in the first tier when you set up an environment. And we'll talk about that in a second. But sometimes just coming into the same place where things are the same and it's the same happy people, you're going to see just a decrease in challenging behavior just because that is calming to them and that's a safety place for them. You're going to see an increase in social interactions between children. And we've worked very hard on talking about solution kits and some other activities that will teach them how to interact with each other and solve their own problems. And you're going to see an increase in child engagement and learning opportunities so that when things are set up for their learning, they are more engaging to them and they will pick up on that. So attention spans are going to increase also. So let's take a look at tier one very quickly. Research, and actually Kathy's research, shows that if that day is designed the same and the environment is safe and nurturing and we develop a relationship with our kids, that is going to address about 85% of the kids in there. So let's talk about relationships for just a minute. And it's definitely the foundation of all these practices. In all the times that I've been in and out of classrooms, and there have been some really difficult kids, when they had a specific relationship with one of the adults in the classroom, I saw a whole lot less problematic behaviors. In our region, kids move from building to building sometimes in different districts, and I've seen kids in classrooms that they didn't have the supports for whatever reason. And then they went to the classroom where there had been trained professionals and they worked on their relationships with these kids. Behaviors just totally turned around. So it's not to say that they need to find that teacher that with the perfect skills. It's just that where they're at then, if you can form a relationship with that kid, you are 90% ahead of the issue. Every kid deserves somebody that's crazy about them. And that doesn't always happen. And also, you look at the brain research shows that children's brains develop best in the context of relationships with their caregivers. So we're built in our brain to needing that nurturing, responsive behavior. And if you think of yourself, if I'm in an uncomfortable position, I'm no way focusing on the part that I'm supposed to learn. It's just not there. So healthy relationships are important. Early relationships are vital. They help us wire and trust others to love and to feel safe. Positive experiences, new brain connections are formed and modified through verbal and physical interactions, and a consistent and secure environment. And I can't say enough about that. The brain develops gradually in response to experience in the classroom. So if it's a chaotic classroom, if it's a cluttered classroom, if things in the room change all the time, that kid's going to have a hard time feeling safe in there and how to respond to what's in the environment. So those are two crucial areas that I would spend a lot of time on working on in that classroom is tier one. So when you design that classroom and the power of prevention, you're going to see children engaged. You're going to see children know the routines and the expectations. The adults have time to have meaningful conversations with children, which means children are less likely to have challenging behaviors. And it just makes sense, when you're restructuring and you've got that visual schedule up and kids know what's coming next and kids know what to expect. You give them routines so they know the expectations of, okay, first we eat, then we clean up, and then we line up to go outside. That's very safe and comforting to kids. And just the interaction between the adult and the kid, many times we just stand and hover at recess or when they're in centers, but such an opportunity to get down on their level and interact and hear their stories and just carry on conversations with them. Many kids are just given directives. Don't do this, eat your food, drink all of your milk, line up, get in a straighter line. So they're given directives all day long. So very important that they learn to get on that next level and have meaningful conversations. And you'll see that I joke and call it a magic trick. But if you follow these and look into really establishing relationships and designing that environment, you're going to see less challenging behaviors. And it's like, well, what happened there? Well, we dealt with what the underlying reason for their behaviors. And so that just helped that to calm down. So we look at expectations and rules, breaking them down. We probably have these in most of our classrooms. But what is expected of me? How am I supposed to act? You've got a lot of kids that have been home most of their life up until now when you get them in preschool. So what are behavioral expectations? Show respect and stay safe are the expectations. So that's a general look at that. But how does that look in the classroom, playground, and hallway? Many times we have our expectations and rules for the classroom, but they don't go out the door to the hallway, to the cafeteria, to the playground. So it's really important that you address this with them and maybe make it very concrete. That how do we show respect? Well, here's one way we do that. We gently touch. We take turns. We have an inside voice. So the rule of thumb with expectations and rules are 2 to 5 expectations. I kind of lean on 2 to 3. I think 5 may just be a little too much at the beginning, but that is what's recommended. And then the rules, I think 3 is enough. But again, it's just based on your program. Okay, so let's look at tier 2. And that is our strongest point of supports and training. We want to look at how we're going to teach social and emotional skills, how we're going to provide supports for that, and just addressing that throughout the entire day. I think one thing that happens in our schedules is you might see them addressing a social activity in large group, and then we don't see it the rest of the day. But, you implant that in the center time, at snack time. You implant those ways they can interact with each other, how they can be mannerly, how they can take turns. So we look at that more specifically. And if done and conducive to your program, you're going to see about 10% more behaviors calming down. So let's look at some of those social and emotional targets. Self-regulation, expressing and understanding their emotions, problem solving, social relationships as social emotional learning for all. Then explicit instruction for some of the kids, but it's good instruction for every kid. And if you look at some of the adults, even me, there are things there that I could have learned, and I was pretty good socially, but I can always learn more. So I like to look at these social skills that we're tracing and focusing in on these kids, but looking at every kid also, including them. We talked about increasing opportunities and, again, bringing in the families, giving them ways to do that at home and being a part of that. And, of course, we have to monitor and take data just to make sure that our strategies are working. Then we move on up to the third level. That is for that child that needs more intense programming set up for them. That what we've done in Tier 1 and Tier 2 still needed additional supports at Tier 3. So let's take a look at that for just a moment. Does this look like anybody that you've seen in a preschool program? I saw that a lot at my house with my youngest child, who would just be mad all the time. He didn't like being around other people, and so I saw this face all the time from him. But we look at the interventions for a kid like this across all the settings, including home and community. It is going to be assessment based and with a team. At this point, for Tier 3, as a teacher, they're not alone. When this kid has these challenging behaviors, it takes a team. It takes people from your building. It takes different people with skills in behavior and setting up programs for them. So at the same time we look at their behaviors, we also have to look at the skills that we need to replace that behavior with. So we're going to do a functional based assessment. We're going to do a behavioral intervention plan at this point. So it gets a little bit more focused when it comes to this. And in the pyramid information and all the materials, there are a lot of explanations and trainings on how to write a functional based assessment and how to set up a program for them. So you get that kind of information in Tier 3. And this is what you get, and this is what you want to see in your teachers. They have such a hard job right now. We have such a hard time keeping teachers in the field. Successful pyramid model teachers have been vocal saying they feel connected, they feel confident, and they feel competent. And that's what we're looking for.
Thank you, Kathy. You've done an amazing job sharing this information today. We do have just one reference we want to draw your attention to here. The National Center for Pyramid Model Innovations. That's at challengingbehavior.org. That website has been updated. We encourage you to check out the website. There's lots of information and free resources there. We also want to encourage you guys, if we've got your attention, we do have a form there that you can click on or scan while you're watching the presentation, and it'll take you to a form and it'll ask some information, and we'll get one of our regional training centers to reach out to you guys if you have any questions. We also have our contact information here at the end. Again, for questions or comments, or if you just want to talk a little bit more about this and how either Kathy or myself or Alicia or your regional training center can support you and your district and your teachers, please feel free to email us and we will connect you with the person that's right for your program. Alicia or Kathy, do you have any closing remarks?
This is Alicia. I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who took the time to come back and listen to and watch this presentation. And feel free to reach out and contact any of us if we can support you in any way.
Yes, excuse me. This is Kathy Meredith, and I just want to thank everybody for listening to something I'm very passionate about. Just working with our kiddos and getting them the skills that they need. And if you have any questions about materials or trainings in certain areas, just give me an email. We'll see what I can do for you.
Thanks,